Welcome to Mirage. This is Bryan and Aiello. Today we are going to be speculating on H.G. Wells. Joining me again is Jill Purrazzi.
That's correct.
And what drew you to H.G. Wells? Why did you want to talk about him today?
Well, H.G. Wells is kind of my introduction into science fiction. Now, of course, not that I never enjoyed science fiction before, but when I decided I wanted to write science fiction, I realized I hadn't really read a lot of science fiction because I almost exclusively read classics. So I went to Goodwill and looked around and saw H.G. Wells, and I'm like, hey, one of the fathers of science fiction. It blends classics and science fiction nicely. So I picked that up.
I might have lost you. Oh, hello?
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. So,
I thought I
so
lost you.
basically, you randomly picked up H.G. Wells in a used bookstore and discovered one of the masters of science fiction.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I'd heard of him before. Um, I've always had an interest in classics, so of course I've heard of him. I watched. There was a version of the Time Machine that I'd watched when I was younger, although I can't really remember too much of it.
I think that's the only other version that's out there, honestly. It's that one and the new one. Now,
Yeah,
the new one, I mean, like now, I think it's like 20 years old.
yeah, yeah.
Before we get on this podcast, I was closing tabs, and I still have about 50 of them open right now, and I lost all of my H.G. Wells research. I'm trying to find. Isn't that ridiculous? I'm trying to get a novella written, and I have every day I open up like 12 of the same tabs. I should just have like a folder or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, H.G. Wells is English. Did you know that?
Yeah.
He was born in the United Kingdom, and he had a mustache,
Yes. Yes.
and he wore a bowler hat.
Very Victorian.
I've never read anything by him. It's really sad. That's what I've discovered. I've done 35, 6, 70 of these podcasts, and when I have a guest on to talk about an author, usually I've never read anything by them.
Yeah.
H.G. Wells, I know through that um, uh, Time Machine movie that you're probably talking about, right?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, do you count anything based on his work? Because The Invisible Man was done by Chevy Chase in the 90s, and I freaking love that movie.
I have not seen that.
The Hollow
Although,
Man with Kevin Bacon, brilliant. I don't know if you count that either, but that was a really good movie as well.
yeah, I haven't seen that either. I am actually listening to The Invisible Man on audiobook right now.
Oh,
It's
really?
very entertaining. I am enjoying it immensely.
What is it about him that appeals to you? I was watching a documentary before we get on the podcast, and it read a little snippet of War of the Worlds, and it sounded charming, British.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of things that interest me about him, both about him as a person, as a writer, and about his works. I think, like I said before, I am a lover of classic literature. There was a large portion of my life before I started writing seriously when that's all I read is classics. So being able to kind of converge those two loves in my life, the science fiction and the classics, of course, but also that he as well as Verne, Jules Verne, they're pretty much from our understanding of science fiction, the earliest of the genre writers of classic of what we understand today as science fiction. Sorry, that got really convoluted.
No, no, I understand completely what you were talking about. Jules Verne was before him, though. He was like a grandfather
Yeah.
to
Yep.
H.G. Wells,
Yeah.
and French to Wells's English.
Yep. And
And
of
who was?
course,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the what we think of as the first science fiction book, which of course there's science fiction elements before this, but what we understand is the first science fiction book is actually Frankenstein, by Mary
Oh,
Shelley.
true.
Um, but she didn't continue in that vein of writing very long.
She didn't really write anything else besides that. That was
Not
interesting in
really.
that vein of work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you count it as fantasy because she is kind of returning life to an inanimate object, which is kind of
Yeah.
magic or whatever, or corporeal or whatever you want to call it. Non-corporeal, is that the right term? I think it's
Yeah.
non-corporeal. And and yeah, but she does use science, doesn't she? At the time,
Yeah.
she was trying to use science, but just ends up being fantasy.
Yeah. Well, it was the science at that time, the early science, and she had actually gone to some talks where they were talking about using electricity to bring people back to life, and
Yeah.
starting to understand how electricity, how our body uses electricity. Um, and of course, being a cyberpunk writer, that's kind of my roots right there. And of course, I love Frankenstein. But yeah, that H.G. Wells is one of the earliest science fiction writers, and especially starting with The War of the Worlds, which is one of his best known books. Um, it really kind of has one foot in each world. One foot in the popular genre fiction that science fiction is today, but also he does bring a lot of literary intelligence into his writing as well. Um, so
Oh man, that was one thing that that documentary went over just slightly is that, the cliches, the tropes of the genre, he created those. And
yeah,
a lot of the things that he was writing,
yep,
conjured them out of the ether, and everybody's using the same thing over and over and over again because of him.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's talking about aliens. With War of the Worlds. That not that he was the first or only one to imagine that, but in popular fiction, definitely. That wasn't something that people imagine very often.
It's an
And
interesting question. Who was his contemporaries? I mean, he was kind of doing something new in a way. He's writing about science, right? That's
yeah,
how he got started writing about science.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, he's right there in the Victorian era. So it's just, when industry started being in a rise and when it was really impacting people's lives. Um, and of course, most people, I want to say Dickens wrote right around that era as well. Um,
Dickens was Mark Twain-ish. He died in the beginning of the 20th century,
okay.
I think. Yeah.
Because if I remember correctly, uh, H.G. Wells,
Oh wow, totally wrong. 1870.
okay. Because
But
that's,
he's more Verne's contemporary.
yeah, so he's like
Oh
at the
man,
beginning
I
of
was
that
thinking
industrial.
who could be America's, equivalent to Dickens or not Dickens to Jules Verne, and I completely forgot about Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
They're kind of right on top of each other. And then we did a podcast on Robert Louis Stevenson,
Mm-hmm.
who kind of
Yep.
fits into that kind of niche between them all. And he was kind of more what we decide an adventure author.
Yeah. Yeah. He was just all over the place.
Lewis
Um,
Carroll is another kind of fantasy guy, kind of doing some weird things in there.
yep. Well, I think, there's a YouTube channel called The Tale Foundry, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels. And they bring a very, very interesting perspective to literature in a very broad sense, talking about genre and the history of certain genres. And I was just rewatching some of them actually today, talking about the history of science fiction, the history of genre, and a lot of those in that industrial era were really just starting to move from most classic literature, which is more literary, moving to the more popular genre fiction. So it's very interesting seeing that kind of move where literature was becoming a little bit more accessible, where it was starting to become a little bit more marketable, and
Yeah.
where it was putting emphasis more on entertainment than it was on let me discuss these deep philosophical truths on for hours on end, which there's nothing wrong with those. I
Hmm.
love, for instance, the great Russian classics. But yeah, that era, there really were changing a lot.
I love the idea of the Russian classics.
Yeah.
I do not love the Russian classics in the slightest little bit. I have bumped my head against what is it? War and Peace many times. It's incredibly irritating to read that, right? I mean, as an author, you want to engage. When I read a book, I want to be just sucked in. I
Yeah.
don't want to put it down. You know what I mean? I'm upset when I have to put it down. I find excuses to go to the bathroom to continue reading it if I'm working or whatever. I love being in a good book, and when I read, that's you're saying that when you read War and Peace, though, you suck into it. It's
It
awesome.
it depends. I think, there's some of those classics where, there's portions, there's chapters that really suck you in. Um, for instance, Anna Karenina, or however you say it,
Anna
is
Karenina.
yeah. There was portions of that book, when I was nearly in tears, and I don't cry when I read. I cry for everything else except for when I read. Um, or when, I just couldn't put it down, and when I was really excited about what I was reading. And there are portions where it was like, okay, we've been sitting in a carriage talking for 3 chapters. Can we move on to the next plot point?
Yeah, right.
Um, but that's I think there's definitely a benefit in reading those, if you enjoy it. There's a pleasure that comes from having read it and having gotten through it, and kind of seeing it all come together and how it makes sense and why it is such this, amazing, great work. But it takes there's a different mental process when you pick up, you know, Dickens or Tolstoy than when you pick up, the, you know, modern works.
Well, yeah. I mean, what do they say? We can't have the modern works without the classics. It's just not
Yeah,
possible.
yeah,
I mean, when what's the guy's name who did Don Quixote sat down and wrote the first actual novel. I mean, he really put the future on fire, basically.
yeah,
So yeah, he's a classic, right? He died in 1945, so he's a
yeah,
classic. 70 years ago, he
yep,
was born. I mean, he was born 150 years ago,
mhm.
right? I mean, he's so strong in our culture still. I
Oh,
say
yeah,
H.G. Wells, you immediately picture something. I don't know
yeah,
if that. I think you don't have to be a sci-fi geek necessarily to picture anything either. You just watch
yeah, yeah.
movies, right?
I
I
mean,
mean,
there's a lot of popular movies that are still coming out that are inspired by his works and that are, even, there was a recent War of the Worlds movie that came out,
Tom,
with,
you mean the Tom Cruise one?
yep.
I loved it. I thought it was really well done. I don't
Yeah.
know whether I'm allowed to. The internet might yell at me for it. I'm not even sure what I'm allowed to like or not like anymore. I saw Solo yesterday, and I immediately came home looking for why I wasn't supposed to like it.
Yeah. I haven't enjoyed most of the newer Star Wars movies, but I think when it comes to Star Wars, like, I'm not a huge fan of space opera. So yeah, but
Well, I
that's
look
off
at it,
topic.
God, man, it's like a fantasy story. It's like the best, right? I mean, it's that cyberpunk fantasy at the ones down on their luck are losing and they have to win, but
Yeah.
everybody pays the penalty, and it's just really good stuff. I've been like really blown away seeing it for the first time, and then I just can't watch them again, which indicates to me that they're just not that good,
Yeah.
which is
I think
sad.
I think for me, when I was younger, I read these series of books called the Jedi Apprentice series. They're YA books, but they were the Star Wars universe, and they followed Obi-Wan Kenobi's apprenticeship with uh whatever his name is. Um,
Oh, Qui-Gon Jinn.
yes, exactly. And they were incredible books. And I think what Star Wars has had the problem doing is the original trilogy is very, very broad. They're on an epic scale. They're dealing with, these just huge things that are happening with the galaxy. And the newer movies, even beginning with the earlier trilogy, um, the prequel trilogy, they're trying to bring it down to a one-on-one person, level, but they're also trying to keep that epic scale. And I
Mm.
feel like it's really made it lopsided because they haven't been able to make the transition very well. Not with world building, they haven't been able to narrow their scope well enough. So the characters are falling flat. The world building's a little bit wonky, and a lot of the storytelling is just, it's just tearing holes in the universe. There's so many holes where the logic just doesn't track. So it's
Ever.
enjoyable.
That's the
Yeah.
thing, though, right? I mean, if you really look at it, in 1977, when Star Wars came out, it was a absolute shit movie,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you really want to look at it objectively, it had lots and lots and lots of problems. It made no sense whatsoever, but
Hmm.
it was good enough to captivate the imagination, which as an artist, excuse me, is what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to
Yeah.
confuse the person who you're engaging with, your reader or your viewer, and making them believe that what you're doing is competent,
Yep.
but really isn't, right? I mean, we're basically just trying to avoid hurting ourselves while following down a story.
Yeah. Yeah. We're peddling lies, and some lies are easier to sell than
The
others.
lie is that we're competent, right? I mean, like H.G. Wells knew what the hell he was doing. He had nobody to go back on. And George
Yeah.
Lucas is kind of in the same way, but he had H.G. Wells to work with. You know what I mean? No H.G.
Yeah.
Wells, no Star Wars, no lopsided universe, which at the same time, what I love about Star Wars is that no matter what you put inside of it, it doesn't get full. You know what I mean? The story
Yeah.
can change endlessly because it's just a fantasy. I mean, if you need a giant monster here, you put a giant monster here. You know, it's just perfect for it. But if you're
Yeah.
working with like an Andy Weir's like Martian movie, God, I really love Andy Weir. Someday he's going to be on
Yeah.
the podcast. I can't wait. I'll play back all the clips where I mention his name. I think it's like once an episode.
He is an
Um,
amazing writer.
right, I love his stuff. But I mean, if you're an Andy Weir, you're going to be stuck within a reality, right? I
Yeah.
mean, aliens aren't probably going to visit you. You're probably going to discover aliens with underneath the regolith or whatnot, right? Is that how you
Yeah.
say that? Is that how you say that out loud? Regolith,
I
like the loose rock on the moon. I'll find out.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff, you read in books. You can't really say it out loud because it's
Right?
all played
It's
in your
all
head.
inside. Hey, regolith. Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Did you hear it say it over the headphones?
just barely. Yeah.
Just regolith.
I was
Cool.
talking.
So H.G. Wells, what the hell were we talking about? Was
We
he
got
ever?
off topic.
Yeah, we're totally off topic. But I mean, in terms of what classics and H.G. Wells and regolith and hard science fiction, he was not a hard science fiction author at all. He was writing
No,
fantasy
no.
monsters.
Yeah, and that's actually where he differed a lot from Verne. But and in War of the Worlds, actually, War of the Worlds has a very, very different voice to it than the Invisible Man. Like I had to backtrack and be like, am I sure this is the same author? But for instance, in the Invisible Man, there's quite a few chapters where he is using science, pseudoscience, just kind of like hand wavy, like explain this, and it has just enough science that you can squeak by with an
Yeah.
Invisible Man. With War of the Worlds, of course, it was all, aliens. So it was just him staring in awe at their technology and not having any way to understand it or explain it. And of course, Jules Verne's was a little bit more. He was a little bit more grounded with what he was writing.
hmm
So they're kind of taking a different approach there.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, yeah. I mean, didn't they use a lot of Verne's? I talked to an author last night who said that they actually used a lot of Verne's ideas to get to the moon.
yeah,
I mean, we're talking about over 100, or we're talking about 100 years after the guy died. His fiction was used as a guidebook by NASA to get their astronauts to the moon. I mean, that's mind blowing. If you say that out loud, it sounds like it's nonsense, like it's not going to work. But then what? Leonardo da Vinci kind of drew a helicopter 500 years before they actually existed, too, right? Or more.
yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, it's amazing what you could do with your imagination, if not physics
exactly.
eventually.
Yeah.
But H.G. Wells isn't reinventing anything, right? I mean, his guy kind of puts together a magic time
Yeah.
machine, right? It doesn't really exist on. Let's see, H.G. Wells's time machine. See if it how it works. This is I love when I want to look something up on Google and it turns into like a paragraph of description of what I'm looking for. H.G. Wells, how did time machine work? You know?
Yeah.
Do you
Yep.
know how it worked?
Oh, do I know? No, sorry. I've seen the like I said, I watched the movie of that. I did not actually read the book. So and I know in the
So it's
movie
the
they
same thing,
changed a
right? It's a
lot.
thing that spun around and flashed colors and worked because he pressed a button or something.
Yeah.
It didn't
I'm
explain
sure it
anything.
would be similar to Invisible Man, where he pulled just enough science out because he was a very intelligent man. You know, he was trained in science to some degree.
H.G.
Um,
Wells was a teacher, right?
I believe, yeah, he was a teacher.
Teacher and obviously I have his Wikipedia page open right in front of me at the moment. H.G. Wells was a novelist, teacher, historian, and journalist. So what did he teach, though?
Trying to remember from when because I was watching some stuff earlier this week as well.
I don't think the education system in England at this time was very good because it sounds like he's just teaching rhetoric stuff, not rhetoric stuff,
Yeah,
but what do you call them? Basic teachery things.
yeah.
The three R's
Um,
and beating kids. That seems to be his thing.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting looking back at the people we respect in history and seeing their flaws that wouldn't have been flaws back then, but are
Right.
definitely like, what on earth? Um, but yeah, he
Like
had
he married his
big
cousin.
flaws.
I mean, want to really judge? We could do that. He married his cousin. He was kind of a philanderer, I think.
He
I think
was.
he was all over the place as far as affairs or whatever.
Yeah, especially later in life. I
I'm looking
believe the source that I had did say he left his first wife um, for a student and married the student, and then she kind of allowed him to kind of do his thing with the yeah.
all the ladies.
Yep. Um, but
That's so funny. This guy is not. He doesn't look like a ladies' man. I mean, would you consider him an attractive dude, a ladies' man type?
no, no, I already had my historical crush.
Who is it?
Ulysses S. Grant, very handsome man.
That's interesting. When I think about death, I think about Ulysses S. Grant, right? Because he's supposed to be a tough guy. He
He's
died of
very tough
throat
guy.
cancer, barely being able to write his autobiography,
Yep.
struggling to produce it, broke off his ass. I mean, he's the one who won the Union. Without him, wouldn't be in America basically, and he was broke, begging for money from publications so he can
Mhm.
live a little bit, dying at the same time. He
Yep.
just did a little bit for his family. Yeah, it's tough. Ulysses S. Grant. Wow, was he an attractive guy?
There's a few pictures of him during the Civil War. Like, yes, yeah.
Really? No, I have to look it up. Ulysses Grant. I never thought of him as attractive either. Kind of tiny and grizzled.
Well, I'm a weird person. Yeah, probably don't have a lot of other people who would agree with me, but
I'm looking at pictures of him right now. I don't agree with you. If you
yeah, like I said,
not
I'm a weird person.
nobody in the 19th century was attractive. So I don't know what happened.
Yeah, well,
I
they're
mean,
all
look at
dust now, so.
right, all dust. My doctor's office is near Trinity, the big church downtown, and Alexander Hamilton's buried in the graveyard right out
Oh
front.
yeah.
I'll walk through and look at it. And all those people. I mean, is there anything underneath the ground? Is there anything left? Are they skeletons? Are there clothes? 18th century clothes in there? It's interesting to think what's
It
underneath our
is.
feet, especially in New York, man. I mean, you'll all of a sudden pass a gigantic freaking cemetery, like thousands and thousands of headstones.
This is extremely off topic.
Go ahead. I mean,
Um,
we haven't even been on topic from
yeah.
the majority of this conversation so far.
There is a YouTube channel called Ask a Mortician, it's very dark and I love it. It's amazing. She's a mortician and she talks about, famous corpses and how they hold up over the years and, great
Interesting.
tragedies. And it's very, very interesting.
What there's a book I read called When Smoke Gets in Your Eyes
Hmm.
about the mortuary business. What's her name? The blog anyway, or the website, or the YouTube video or channel?
The
I'll have to
YouTube
think of
channel is
it.
called Ask a Mortician. I'm not entirely sure of her
Ask
name.
Mortician. I just want to see if it's the same person.
Possibly. I know she's written a few books. Yeah.
Spell mortician would help this process. Is she like got a I don't know how to describe this haircut. I guess it's the
well,
only one.
that's
She's
probably
young,
her
right?
then. That's yeah, youngish, black hair.
Yeah.
With yeah, very, very.
Is she in California, San Francisco area?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, maybe this is the same woman. I don't know if I could work in a mortuary.
I know I couldn't, but it's yeah. I don't know. It's one of those weird interests that kind of
Order of the
ghosts
Goddess
and.
of Death. That's the name of one of
She's
her books,
very
I guess.
entertaining. She's very entertaining to listen to. That's for sure.
Maybe I can get her on the podcast.
Yeah,
Trying to
totally
find
should
trying to
talk
find
about zombies.
Does she write? Does she talk about zombies? Does she talk about
Uh,
the undead?
she references those things, of course. Like I said, she's very entertaining to listen to, and goes off in those sorts of tangents.
Okay, Caitlin Dowdy.
Hmm.
Is that who we're talking about?
I'm
You
not
don't know.
entirely sure. I don't. Yeah, sorry. I know the YouTube channel name. I usually.
Oh, I hate her website. Can I just can't I just highlight your name and search for it? Why is that too hard? Now I have to know how to spell your name too. It's ridiculous. The Good Death. Yeah, it is her. What Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. That took a long time. It was a
Yeah,
good book. I really enjoyed that. I have not read her newest one, From Here to Eternity,
yeah,
Traveling. Nope. What is it? From Here to Eternity, Traveling, ellipses. Anyway, H.G. Wells. How many books did he
yes.
write? Death.
Oh, he
He
was
did die
very,
too.
very prolific. Yes.
We're not off topic because he is dead.
He
So,
is dead. Yes,
yeah.
yes, and he is probably dust as well. And he did write about death. His characters died.
Wow, he wrote a lot.
Yes, and I think a lot of them were shorter works, um, like short stories
Wikipedia thinks
and
they're all
whatnot.
like novels.
um,
Lump them all
I
together. Oh no,
know
there's a series. Oh wow, he wrote so much.
he did. He started writing quite young, and he actually made it. He got quite popular. I believe his first novel was The Time Machine, and that got him quite popular. Um, so he actually enjoyed quite a bit of popularity during his life as an author.
Yeah, Time Machine, 1895. A year later, he did The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is also good. A year later, The
Hmm.
Invisible Man, War of the Worlds in 1898. And
Yeah,
then nothing. He wrote a lot of chaff.
yeah,
Like his good work was in the beginning. Isn't that interesting? Like his great work is the first works that he did. And then if
yep,
you start going through the list of novels, then none of them pop, as in like they made it past the I don't know, like
yeah,
Crucible or something.
yeah. That's those early works. I've seen them referenced in everything from Spy Kids to retellings, and they're just all over the place.
They've been made into countless movies.
They have.
It's very interesting. And then there's a bunch of nonfiction, which I'm guessing nothing really made it into popular culture.
I know one source I was listening to did suggest that United Nations used some of his work as a basis for their human rights. Um, I'm not entirely sure what it would be called. But I believe he was a socialist.
Oh,
He
interesting.
was quite outspoken about those opinions. But I've also heard some contradictory um, reports, a few sources suggesting that he was elitist. Elitist. There we go.
Um,
That's how you say it. That's what happens when you read and you don't.
like elitist in terms of what? Like how
uh,
he viewed himself, his place in the world, and the place of the United Kingdom in the world.
how he how he viewed poorer people, um, specifically, which I don't think that that source is correct because I've read War of the Worlds, and it's basically this long imaginative essay on why colonialism is bad.
Yeah, right.
Um,
That's basically what it is.
yeah. So, uh, and in The Invisible Man, like, I'm not saying that all authors' opinions bleed through their works this obviously, but the tone of it is a little bit degrading towards the average person, but it also it does kind of have a foot in the genre fiction where it does take the characters viewpoint a little bit more.
Hmm.
So while it does kind of depict the poor people and the average people as kind of dumb or mean or brutish, um, it it doesn't exactly depict the Invisible Man in a great light either. He's very arrogant and dumb and gets his wish and uh, kind of ruins his own life trying to reach this perfect life away from all the stupid people. um
I live in New York. I'd love a life away from stupid people.
yeah, but I think I can definitely see, I was listening to one um YouTube channel where they're kind of talking about his viewpoints and how he kind of wore his political viewpoints on his sleeve. And I can definitely see how that factors into The Invisible Man. I haven't finished it yet. But there's this one part where it's talking about um, how the main character makes himself invisible and immediately is faced with the fact that he's made himself invisible and he can't wear clothes because then people would see him and they would take him captive to, use him for scientific experiments, which is basically what he was doing to himself, but, he's still scared of that. Um, so he is now out on the streets, freezing cold. He can't eat because they can see the food in his stomach. Um, so it's just this very interesting depiction of he got his way, he got what he wanted to escape all the stupid people by being invisible and to play cruel pranks on people and take whatever he wants. However, he catch 22, he can't get away with any of it.
Yeah, that's very interesting because he does not. Does he burn his lab down too? Does he
He
destroy his research? Because I think I remember I'm looking at I'm thinking about the Hollow Man, and I think he destroys his entire lab.
Yeah, he did not only burn down his lab, he was angry at his landlord because he was torturing a cat and his landlord was a cat person and tried to kick him out. Um, so he was angry at his landlord and his lab was in his apartment, and to hide all of his research because he was paranoid about it, he decided to burn down the lab, which included these poor people's house.
That's
So
interesting.
I love this character. I'm loving this book. I like it a lot more actually than War of
I
the
mean,
World.
juxtapose that with the idea that H.G. Wells ends up with a legacy that lasts, I don't know how long, but he obviously posthumously helped the United Nations, right?
Yeah.
And the Invisible Man was so selfish. One of his characters was so selfish that he destroyed everything he had left. I mean, what could you have done with a invisibility serum or however the hell he made himself invisible? It's incredibly interesting. I wonder if H.G. Wells had been given an opportunity or wrote The Invisible Man later on in his career, whether he would have still made that lab burnt to the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially reading. Like I said, the voice is so different reading War of the Worlds. The main character in the War of the Worlds, and it's written first person. Um,
Which is
the
never the right answer, right?
I'm not a big fan of first person, especially because, in my opinion, it's like rarely ever done well. But that's because I'm really picky when it comes to point of view. So I just try to keep my opinions to myself. Um,
Well, Joe, you just shared your opinion, so now it's out there in the world.
yeah, but
Own it.
I won't pick apart why I think it's not done well. So all of you first person writers out
Well,
there
you
can
might
just
help some people.
imagine that you're doing it well.
I was writing a first-person story the other day, just like a
Yeah.
little 500-piece story, and my attempt was to try and just narrate it from a past tense kind of experience, which ruins the story in a way, isn't it? When you write anything in past tense, first person, don't you know that the author, the narrator, is going to live? It kind of removes a little bit of that.
Traditionally, and it's actually changed recently, and I don't agree with the change. But spoiler alert for anyone who is actually interested. I believe the Divergent series, which I haven't read, but I've interacted with people who read it. The Divergent series is written in first person, and then she switches to first person, multiple person in the middle of the next book, which is problematic because you can't tell the points of view apart. And then in the third book, she kills the main character, but it's written in first person, I believe, past tense.
From
I may
his
be
point
wrong
of
about
view,
that. From the female
the
main
dead
character's
character.
point of view, the first book is from her point of view alone, and in the second book she introduces the boyfriend's point of view so that she can continue writing the story after the main character dies. But traditionally, if you're writing first person, you don't kill the main character. That's kind of, you can kind of get away with it in present tense because it's more immediate. But traditionally it's like, okay, so who's telling you the story then, if you're writing it? But things have changed a lot as far as that. And point of view, yeah, you've gotten me on one of my favorite nitpicks here. So
Nobody's saying these are great books, like in terms of writing or whatnot, right? Aren't they fluff, like the Divergent series, or even like what was her name, the one who did the Jennifer Lawrence books?
Hunger Games,
Like these aren't literature, right? And these are
they're
YA
not
books. They're
literary.
kind of,
Yeah, I mean, there's arguments to be made for them. I've read the first of the Hunger Games. I'm not a huge fan of young adult literature myself. It's very, I think, right now because it's so marketable and it's so popular. Um, it's kind of trended towards
oh man, I would say
being,
it's still the echo of Harry Potter, right? Everybody
yeah,
wants to have that happen again, and
yeah,
unfortunately, I don't think we're aware of like how heavy that bolt of lightning struck the earth. I mean, we're still vibrating because of it.
yeah. That's Harry Potter and Hunger Games made a huge change on it. Now
Well,
everything is a
did you
female
read?
main character, first
Did you
person.
read Harry Potter? You did read it, right?
I did, yes. It's been
Okay.
a long time ago. I've only read through it once, and I would definitely enjoy reading them again.
Do you have that same opinion about the Hunger Games? I mean, I'm being kind of a jerk because I didn't read the Hunger Games, but I freaking loved Harry Potter. And not only did
Yeah,
I love it, but the whole world loved Harry Potter. And I
yeah.
have not heard the same kind of whispers about the Hunger Games. I mean, Charlene Harris, is that her? No, I always mess them up. Is that her? No, it's not
Collins,
her.
something Collins. I think her
Yeah,
name.
you're right. I
Um,
mean,
I
I'm sorry. So answer the question. You're on the spot. The
all
light
right.
is on you. Do you think the Hunger Games should be burned,
I
taken off the
think.
shelves, and destroyed? Essentially.
Well, maybe I'll
Tell me, do you
reserve
think?
that for
Do you think?
Twilight.
No, the Twilight too. Twilight, the Hunger Games, and anything Russian.
I
Just take.
think no. You leave my Russian classics alone. I will fight you. Um,
No, the question is, do you think it compares to Harry Potter, the Hunger Games series?
yeah. No. I think. and it's really hard to critique, especially coming from as an author, someone who has experienced the marketing side
No, I
of
mean,
it
just as a
and the
reader, as somebody who
difficulty.
enjoys like the written word and
Yeah.
stories or whatever, do you think it was good?
I think purely from an artistic sense, and I've only read the first book, purely from an artistic sense, I think Hunger Games kind of kicked off kind of the worst of young adult literature. And
Okay.
I don't think that Hunger Games itself was bad. I think that she made some intelligent choices, but I think that the choices that she made for that particular trilogy don't work for most books.
What's interesting though too is that it wasn't even original. She ripped off a Japanese author.
Yeah, but nothing's original anymore.
All of my work is original. I don't even
You're
know.
ripping off real life.
Yeah, totally. Real life's my bitch.
um, yeah, but I think
You understand I misspelt that, right? And I realize that too. I'm not editing it. I'm leaving it in there.
um, yeah, I think artistically, I can see why people enjoy it. And I think there's good parts about it. And I think that it conveyed the message that it had to tell well enough. But I think that it doesn't, how to put it lightly, kindish way. It, I think it had good parts and then it had a lot of stuff that's just not.
I don't know, man. I think it might be like comparing a BLT steak to a McDonald's hamburger, right? You sit them right down next to each other. They're just not the same thing.
Yeah.
They might
Yeah.
be.
I mean,
They
it
might,
just,
they might even came from the same cow. You know what I mean? The
yeah.
same cow might have produced that delicious porterhouse and that hamburger, and you're going to be disappointed with one of them and just changed with the other one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes down to it, all art is taste, you know?
But not that though. I mean, that's a classic. I think Harry
Yeah.
Potter will be a classic for all time.
Oh, yeah,
Whereas,
definitely. Harry Potter changed literature.
and I think Jennifer Lawrence might be a classic for all time. Therefore, The Hunger Games might kind of follow her career through. Hasn't she won 2 Oscars or just one?
I don't follow celebrity gossip or any of that
Gossip.
kind of nonsense.
That's
I,
the Academy. That's the Film Academy. You're
I
not a big
don't
movie watcher,
follow.
are you?
Not anymore. I used to be. I yeah. If I get too much into something, it ruins my writing. So
Is there?
I just
Oh,
want to
do
watch
you?
TV.
I want to read more. I'm just like I'm on Reddit too much. I'm on
Yeah.
my phone too much. I think I need to like buy physical books from now on.
Eh,
I'm terribly disappointed with my reading. I'm like
go
three
to
quarters of
Goodwill.
what is it?
Go to Goodwill. You get paperbacks for like 99
Oh,
cents, and there's like classics galore if you're into classics.
it's
But
not
there's also,
access. It's just something else. I cannot get away from Reddit. I just
yeah,
scroll looking for these little tidbits of information that help. You know what I
yeah,
mean? These things that you're not even aware are gonna make stories happen. I'm addicted to that.
yeah. That's me in podcasts
Oh yeah, you pull stuff out
and YouTube videos.
and YouTube
But
videos
yeah,
are starting. I mean, there's a lot of good on-demand content out there right now.
we're living in the age of information. I mean, and that's I think something that frustrates me the most as an author, someone who really cares and works hard to create good stories. Isn't even that people, aren't necessarily rushing out and buying my books and making the movies and that kind of stuff. I think my biggest frustration is seeing other authors sell themselves short because they're not willing to put the work in, you know?
There is a thing called the cult of the amateur. I heard this on a Joe Rogan podcast, and it actually hurt my feelings. I'm like, dude, that sucks because it was actually said by a professional comedian. I'm like, oh man, is he talking about
Yeah.
anybody who's not making money or whatever? But he was talking about people who are kind of echoing what they see, aping the artists that are creating content or stealing content from those artists and passing it off as their own for internet points or likes or hugs or whatever kind
Yeah.
of rewards you get for posting things on websites nowadays. And I think eventually, I mean, that's good if you get credit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I'll mention him again. This 2 times, Andy Weir. I should make money every time I mention his name. But the story that he wrote that kind of kicked off his career, The Egg. I
hmm
I gave you a copy of that, right? Did you read The Egg?
I it probably got lost in my inbox. Sorry.
I
I
don't
think I
know.
remember you sending it to me.
Yeah, I always send a copy. The Egg is a really magnificent story, but I mean you can find it all over the place.
Yeah,
So
I
the
think
guy's
I
not
saw it
getting
the other day
paid
as
for it
well.
anymore. So my
Mm.
point is what? There's tons of content out there, and what originated that rambling monologue of nonsense?
um, People selling themselves short by not taking advantage of the information that's
Oh,
readily available.
I was discounting them and saying they'll be gone anyway.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
field will.
I think storytelling is the language of us as human beings. And so everyone has a story to tell, and they get excited about those stories, and I can understand that desire to create. I think the problem becomes when you buy into that whole artistic nonsense where you believe that stories can be created in a bubble and not impacted by the world around you, and you don't, and you're like, the words will just flow out of me and they'll be beautiful, without realizing it's a craft and you have to work at it, and taking other people's opinions is not going to ruin your book. It'll probably make it better, so I think.
Yeah, I guess I understand what you're saying there about that ownership thing. Get over it. Write the next story. Edit the first story.
Yeah.
Keep going. I mean, it really does drive me crazy when an author will say, "This is my series." How do you know? How many copies of the first book did you sell? None, or 12, or whatever. Is it a hit? Does it deserve a series? Or can you continue to write novels until you get so freaking good that you do pop and somebody wants 12 books of one of
Yeah.
your worlds or whatever? I mean, it's really difficult to say. I mean, it really is because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, art is it's a very complicated thing, and I will never put anyone down for creating art, and I'll never put anyone down for wanting to share art. However, I will get frustrated with people who get arrogant about their art and put down other people's art without even trying to create good art. It's complicated. It's hard to explain that my frustrations.
The unfortunate thing is that we're all in this kind of bubble of social media. We're together in a way. I mean, we can
Yeah,
find each other so easily and accidentally. So, I mean, you can discover somebody is kind of doing nothing and hoping to get some kind of credit, and it might be irritating if you're doing more and you're not getting that same kind of credit or something
yeah,
along those lines, right? I mean, we are aware of what other people are doing, and we can find them. I mean, God, man, I've been finding some really cool people to talk to on this
oh yeah,
podcast just by searching topics that I'm interested in. And that has
it's
always been kind of a fantasy, right? Of having a podcast that I get to talk to people about things that I'm interested in talking about.
yeah,
So
yep.
cool.
I love the author community. It's an incredible community of very intelligent, very giving people. I love it.
Yep. And I don't know. H.G. Wells moved to a seaside town that had a lot of authors in it too.
Yep.
So I guess it's historical. I mean, even Hemingway had a writing community around him
Yeah,
while he was
and
writing. I mean,
people. Go ahead.
no, I paused to hear you.
I was just gonna say, there's Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and the Inklings.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, you can't do it alone. And another thing
no.
I've discovered is you could look at people's bios. You don't really see this with H.G. Wells because he seems like kind of a selfish prick. But you see a lot of authors have a wife. Stephen
Yeah,
King is a prime example of that. Have a wife that stay by them the entire time and push and edit and I imagine nagging happens occasionally as well. You know, they have a tandem partnership that goes forward.
yeah,
Tabitha King, I mean, if you look at her bibliography, it's not very big, and she produces a novel every once in a while.
yeah.
Yet Stephen King produces these monstrosities 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah.
I mean, what's happening there?
And
And
it's
he even says on writing, right, that he sent, and Tabitha King reads his stuff all the time. How are you
yeah,
going to write when you're reading like a 1,000-page novel, rough draft form, every 3 or 4 months?
yeah, it's incredible.
Right?
And I guess his son is quite the accomplished writer as well. Has written some incredible works as well. So
Trending
it's
in that direction, but I mean, not disattached from Stephen King, right? You know who Joe Hill is, or are you
yeah,
talking about the other one?
yeah. Joe Hill.
The other ones, I think all of them are writers.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with his family. I like that he's created that culture in his family of sharing the things he loves with them and hasn't pulled away from them and created his own world where it's like, you guys go do your thing. I'm going to be a writer in my writer closet.
Yeah, there was a great I don't even know, I have like a collection of images with words. I was like a meme, but I'm not sure exactly what it was
Mm,
called. It was basically starts with it was Stephen King was associated with it, and starts on a panel with him at his desk, and the desk is in the middle of the room, and it's a gigantic mammoth desk where his computer's sitting on top of it, and it's important. And before he had the desk, he was very excited to get the desk, and once he did have the desk, there was no other room in the room for anything. So when
hmm
his kids wanted to hang out, they couldn't. Oh, dad's working on a novel. He's in his room with the
hmm
desk room. And he realized that if he shoved his desk over into the corner, he can invite other people into his life and still produce.
Yeah.
And
It kind of makes me wonder if that's the reason why H.G. Wells' work um, was
floundered.
not as good in the end. If it was
That's
because,
such a great point, right? We talked about that cousin not being his wife anymore, didn't we?
yeah, and if his choice to have shallow sexual relationships with women instead of fostering a deep romantic love for his wife and building a family and building a community, if that choice is what made his works less, it didn't impact the community anymore because he didn't allow the community to impact him, I guess.
And also, we're talking about a man who's so selfish that he can be. Um, God, there's not. I'm looking for a word that doesn't exist. You know, he could be. God, there is a word I want to use. I don't know what it is though. Infidelity, but that's
Yeah,
not. Infidelity is not the conjugational word I want to use though. What I want to say? He obviously he was not very honorable to his wives, cheating on
yeah,
them, and the women that he was cheating on with. I mean, how do they feel? They're probably not hussies or whatever. He probably lied to them to do it. And he's
yeah.
probably spending a lot of
At least
energy
taking,
having
yeah, at least taking advantage of his fame.
right.
Um, and that's the works that he is well known for
Happened
were
before. That's so
very, yeah,
interesting.
they were very thoughtful looks at society. Like the Invisible Man, like, yeah, the characters were human, they were flawed, but that was part of the story, explaining, why you shouldn't cut yourself off from humanity, even if sometimes you need that rest. Um,
But didn't you also say that the Time Machine kind of reads like an essay on industrialism and
the the War of the Worlds kind of reads as an essay on colonialism.
colonialism?
Yeah,
Okay.
his outlook on that, and I believe there was a particular incident that was causing a lot of uproar. I can't remember exactly what it was, um, but at that time, England especially was kind of expanding into a lot of third world countries and kind of taking over. So he was bringing it home to his hometown,
Oh, I heard
and
a quote about this. He was at a party. I just picture he was always at parties. Right. Probably had his secretary writing his novels for him.
yeah.
No, this was World of Words, and they were talking about um somebody collapsed, like they got attacked by the British, or when they fell, and
Mm,
somebody said, "Oh, think about us being attacked by them," or something along those lines, and it spawned
yeah.
the idea of the War of the Worlds.
Hmm.
Was Orson
Yeah.
Welles related to him?
I'm sorry. What was that?
Was Orson Welles related to H.G. Wells?
Orson Welles, and this is, if I'm remembering this correctly, Orson Welles is the actor, correct?
Yeah, the one who did the telecast
I
that
don't
freaked
I
out
don't believe he
America.
was actually related, and I think that there's a slight difference in their last name. And it's just another romantic thing that's attached to H.G. Wells, a
Oh,
lot of
it is spelled differently. There's an E. It's a
yeah.
Welle. And I don't know about romantic. I mean, I was just laying on the couch talking to my wife about who I was talking about today, and I realized there was an Orson Welles and there was
Yeah.
an H.G. Wells. I'm like,
Both
oh,
attached to the same thing. No, more romantic in the I don't know, the romance, the aura around the story of War of the Worlds. Um and yeah, Orson Welles, for the listeners, Orson Welles was a voice actor who did a radio drama of the War of the Worlds during, I want to say it was during the Cold War. And so there was already this kind of panic in America because, they just came out of World War II. There was the nuclear bombs, and I would have to look it up to be specific about the time period.
I'm looking at
But
it right now and I'm just having a hard time finding it in his timeline.
yeah, I watched a long documentary on it. I'm just not entirely sure of the time period. However, they did this audio drama, but they phrased it the way they did it. It sounded like a broadcast, a news broadcast, and they did the War of the Worlds as a news broadcast, and it created panic.
Yeah.
People thought it was real.
It wasn't
Uh,
the Cold War. It was 1938.
okay, okay, I wasn't sure if I was correct about that. I want to say it was in that period. Um,
You know what gets me? He wrote the thing in 1898,
hmm
right? And when I think of the World of Worlds, I mean, I even think about the 1950 movie that I saw so many times as a kid. It
yeah,
just doesn't seem like an 1898 novel. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Aliens coming down and attacking horse-drawn carriages.
yeah, and
You know what I mean?
that's what reading it is like. And that's, I think, what was so interesting about that novel for me is it really was this kind of collision of the old and the new. This collision of, here's this concept that is still fascinating us, alien invasion. What that The Quiet Place, just came out, and that's considered an alien invasion, um, by most people who've watched it. Um,
I'm curious, the idea of alien invasions. I just watched a YouTube video on some ancient Sumerians
mhm,
who believed in gods from heaven,
yeah,
and every town had a god, and they lived in the town. The people visit their gods and interact with them. And it's a very weird way the Sumerians talked about their gods during
yeah,
the civilization that 500, whatever it was. Even the Jewish people were there too, and it really influenced their culture. But
mhm.
in terms of World of Worlds, I mean, Verne wasn't writing about alien abductions, was he? I don't think he was writing about extraterrestrial beings. I mean, what caused this dude in 1898 to all of a sudden write about aliens visiting Earth?
Yeah, well, I think that's, he was inspired by the colonialism. The idea of, just as the English people went into these third world countries with their superior technology and devastated them.
No,
And then,
I totally get that though. But the idea of aliens, though,
yeah,
external to
that
Earth. I mean, this dude
specifically.
was 1898. Weren't people like fervently religious, thumping Bibles, going to heaven if they heard the call or got the good news or whatever?
I
Like
think,
100% going if they believed like that. There was nothing outside of the atmosphere except for heaven.
yeah. Well, I
I
want to
don't
say
know.
that was after Darwin, and Darwin really changed the face
Yeah, but not
of that.
aliens, right? I mean, did Darwin kind of spawn? I'm not saying I know or don't
Yeah.
know. Did
Well,
Darwin kind of say, well, what about aliens? I don't think he's associated with that either.
yeah, no, it would be hard to pinpoint where the concept first kind of came out. Um,
Interesting dissertation for a doctorate.
yeah, yeah,
Where did Wells come up with the idea of alien invasion?
very. And
I
and
mean,
that's
I understand invasion, right? But why space in rocket ships that come down? Where Verne had a rocket ship that went up, kind of, right? It wasn't even a rocket ship; it was kind of a cannonball,
yeah. Oh
uh,
yeah.
right? I mean, we don't have
Yeah.
rocket ships in 1898. We don't even have rockets in 1898. We have cannons, but aliens came from another planet and settled down on Earth. I
Yeah.
think it's just bizarre. What a crazy moment,
Yeah. And
and what he came up with.
the technology that he spoke of, for him at the time would be fantastical. One of their weapons is, the
Oh,
lasers. Um,
flying.
yep,
The idea of
flying.
flight, right? Everybody's trying to fly, but he's got people flying through the atmosphere and land from something. They don't even understand it, right? I guess they do. That's dumb because they did have astronomy, right? They
Yeah.
just look through telescopes and know about planets or whatever.
Yeah, well,
So maybe,
that's how the entire story begins. Is talking from the first person, talking about how we were looking at Mars and never imagining, and then we saw like a flash of light, and we never imagined what it could possibly be, and it was the aliens. Um, but yeah, that's and of course, around that time, that was the industrial, the whole science really taking over in industry and smoke and fog and all those things factor into
yeah.
the book.
I mean,
All
he
those
he was
things.
alive during the fog during London in London that killed like 30,000 people in a
Yeah.
night. I mean, all of a sudden, like 30,000 people died, and they said, "You know what it was? It was that fog."
Yeah, well, that was one of the weapons that the
No,
aliens
that
used.
was industrialized UK and the United Kingdom. That was like poison
Yeah.
being pushed from their factories.
Yeah, and that's, he pulled those things right out of, and that's one of the reasons why he moved out of London is because he was having health issues attached to that. But, there was, the water was boiling and turning black and
So
sticky, and
crazy.
there's,
So
the
crazy.
aliens were putting out this black smoke that blanketed everything and poisoned people and created this like black dust on everything. Um, but they were also introducing alien plants, which were taking over the countryside. So, there's the environmentalism in there as well. All very, very relevant, very, when it comes to science, that science fiction it's as a genre, science fiction is just incredibly relevant and just really explores some really powerful concepts.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I just
Mhm.
published a piece not too long ago with the magazine. I don't know when it's going to come out, but I have
Ah,
a solar.
congratulations.
Thank you. I have a solar flare that pulls back the fabric of the universe so you can see what's on the other side of it.
Mm,
I love the idea of speculative fiction because you really can do whatever the hell you want.
yeah.
And that's what this guy did, right? I mean, I don't know where his mind was. Maybe he was like taking advantage of some badass opium or something, right? I mean, that was a big thing in London at that time, I can imagine. But it's such a crazy invention to come up with for him, not for
Yeah.
us. He gave that to us as a gift, right?
Yeah.
That's another thing that he gave humanity posthumously is all these alien invasion things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, even the other day, um, I was thinking about my own writing and using concepts that I read in War of the Worlds to come up with ideas for the interaction between my aliens and my human beings in this cyberpunk world. And this is, some of the earliest writing in science fiction having an impact. Um, and of course I'm cyberpunk, so Frankenstein comes in there as well. There's these concepts that just they're still relevant. They're still important for us to explore today.
Right? Death. That's the most important one. What is
Yeah.
it? How can you avoid it?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there
And
anything on the other
that's,
side of
you
it?
know, I feel like science fiction science fiction, yes, is a tool to explore that. I believe that horror is probably one of the best tools to explore that. And I've seen it done very well in several. And that's why, chose to write the Raven Tree Society as well. But yeah, all those it there is particular quality in science fiction, in well-written science fiction, that allows you to take on these deeper things that just like we're talking about with Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, the Russian classics, um, talked about philosophy and life and death and religion and families and and science fiction allows you that same tool to be able to explore things, questions like what are human beings, what separates human beings from animals, from machines, from just really powerful questions, and allows you to do it in a way that's very entertaining and that doesn't make the reader be like, can we get past the three chapters of horse-drawn carriage and onto something a little bit more interesting, you know
Hmm.
um so it really is, it's a powerful tool.
Yeah, exactly. And H.G. Wells is kind of proved there. Verne as well. I'd
Yeah.
like to talk about him eventually. I mean, obviously, he's the dude. He started it all
Jules Verne.
in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to explore where he kind of came from, what his deal is. And there's a lot of authors left in that kind of era that we
Yep.
could talk about going forward. I don't even know. H.G. Wells, I mean, in terms of what he's written, unfortunately, it's been translated into another medium, hasn't it? And his
Yeah.
authorship exchanged hands with that. Whatever his intentions were, when I watched The Time Machine, I actually got the intention of that actor
Yeah.
and that director of photography and that scriptwriter. H.G. Wells' idea might have fed that or gave birth to that incarnation, that film, in the
Mm.
horrible, horrible movie that was in the 1990s or 2000s that came out.
Yep.
I mean, he's alive in our culture, but at the same time, he's a ghost, right? He's like
Yeah.
haunting his own stories. Because I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if I could read World of Worlds. I was talking to my wife about reading some of these classics and how hard it is because people have moved past it. Like Stephen King, not even Stephen King, but H.G. Wells died in 1945. So who picked up the mantle? Asimov,
Yeah.
Heinlein, who's the Fahrenheit 451 guy? That guy. I mean, there's a lot of people that kind of picked up the torch when he dropped it and ran with it, and it looks like they did a better job. But what they did was they refined what he already did. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? The cave paintings as being the first story ever recorded and sold to humanity.
Yeah. Well, I think, as a lover of history and um it's easy to say, not only to say, oh, well, we're getting to be more intelligent human beings as time goes on, which isn't entirely true. Yeah, our technology is getting better and we're living longer, but in other ways, we're really losing a lot. And that's something else that science fiction, discusses, whether technology is good or bad or a double-edged sword. I think it's the same with writing. We're like, okay, well, Crichton is the best science fiction writer, and Orson Scott Card, and we're like, they're so much better than these classical works. People have learned how to write better. And I don't know if that's entirely true. I think they've just learned to write for today's tastes. And 100 years from now, there's going to be people looking at what we've written and say, you know, we've gotten so
Hello,
much better.
hello.
Hi, are you there?
Hey, I lost you.
Sorry. Yeah, I
I
was
don't know
wondering if
where
that
I
was me.
lost you. I think I lost my internet connection or something, but it's back.
I'm sorry.
Do you remember if you heard my fantastic monologue? It stretched on and
I
on.
was monologuing at the same time, so we were probably both
You're
just talking in
monologuing
the
to
air.
nobody. That we are a bunch of writers, aren't we?
Oh, I love it.
Do you think that we've beaten H.G. Wells into a submissive moment, or person of history, historical note?
Yeah, I think that's actually what I was just talking about as well. Um, I think I think that we haven't written better books than H.G. Wells. We have written books that are appropriate for our taste and our time.
Yeah, exactly.
So his works just don't fit our current tastes. It's not that, and that's the thing about art is so subjective. So to objectively say we've gotten better, we write better books, that's not necessarily true, I think. So I
As a
think,
science author, as somebody who writes about science in a fictional
yeah.
setting, I mean, what you're doing is taking what we know, which
Hmm.
changes every single day, and trying to translate that into a story.
Yeah.
And we obviously know a lot more than H.G. Wells did. I don't even know if they had soap in hospitals during H.G. Wells' life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, science fiction is going to be constantly changing because science is constantly changing. Um, However, I think there's this thing with science fiction. You can't, and I know people are like, oh, science fiction isn't always futuristic. However, science fiction is pretty much always futuristic. It's this thing with science fiction where you're almost racing the clock,
Hmm.
where you have to think about
Yeah,
what's coming
you're
next.
racing whether or not it's going to sneak up and be something actually legitimate sooner than
Exactly.
you need it to be. Or
Yeah, like,
like
go
like
ahead.
19 or what's it called, Blade Runner, as an example in a movie, right?
Yeah.
What they say, 1990 something is going to have flying cars,
Yeah.
and Los Angeles is going to be a wasteland or some horrible thing like that,
Yeah. Well,
and they
I
dated
mean,
themselves.
and there are some things that have happened that science fiction has predicted would happen. And there
Last
are,
night I talked to a guy about Arthur Clarke, and
uh-huh,
he actually was able to say in the 1950s that we were going to have cell phones, that we were going to have personal computers. I mean, the people who have speculated on the future have done
yeah,
a really fantastic job of pulling stuff out of their hats that have become real things. I mean, Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, as an author of speculative fiction, came up with a bunch of stuff that exists in our life, like sliding doors. I mean, it's just,
yeah. Well, it's who
we're
would have
trying to read the
thought?
future, right? I mean, that's our job. We're trying to see what the future is going to be like based
Yeah,
on the present that we're having.
I mean, who would have thought Aldous Huxley's Brave New World talks about genetic engineering?
Oh man,
And
when did he write that? That was earlier than Verne, wasn't it? Or was that early 20th century?
I wouldn't be able to pin down a date. I'm sorry, I'm horrible with dates, which is embarrassing for someone who says they love history, but I can't. Um, but yeah, that's in that he talks about genetic engineering. And today, we have biopunk is this emerging genre, and that's one of the genres that I love and that I work in. But we today are learning how to solve genetic diseases with actual genetic engineering. I just watched an amazing documentary on Netflix about it. We
Oh,
are
it's very
actually,
incredible, right? They
yeah,
can use your own stem cells to repair your body.
yeah.
It's
So
incredible. I mean, are we going to die? Is life worth living if you're not going to die? Isn't death kind of add that kind of final exclamation point in your life? I don't know. Eventually, maybe one day we'll have to make a decision. We'll just live forever.
and there's science fiction that explores that as well. It's 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 amazing what science fiction can be used to do. And of course, when you say science fiction, it's such a huge, broad genre. But
Yeah,
um,
totally. You can break it apart, but it's
oh
speculative
yeah,
in nature, and that's basically why we love it. Speculate.
yep, yep.
Is there anything else that we need to mention about H.G. Wells? He was a philanderer. He was an unattractive guy, but ladies loved him. He's probably just confident. I got money,
Yeah,
baby.
famous, very famous.
I got a house on the beach. I got money. My wife don't care.
Well, it's before television. Before television, that's the entertainment you consume, right?
Right? And you go to the men's club, and then when you're drunk, you go to the ladies' club. I don't even know where they would pick up ladies at in that time.
Apparently,
Wasn't
he picked
everybody
one up at the
demure?
beach.
The beach?
He
Oh
wrote a
man,
book
that's
about it.
true. Actually, they'd be like half dressed on the beach. No,
He
it'd be
wrote a
more
book about
dressed.
it. Yep.
What? They'd be more dressed on the beach.
Yeah.
Totally covered up. Oh no, the sun. All right. Well, we'll call it quits on H.G. Wells. It's fantastic. I
Yes.
love it. That's you know me and my